Apple unveiling its AI strategy at the Worldwide Developer Conference yesterday. The company's late entrance into the AI race includes Apple Intelligence and OpenAI integration with Siri and a lot more. Joining us to talk about the announcement is Steven Levy, editor-at-large at Wired. Some people thought this was a make-or-break moment. I'm curious what your initial reactions to seeing what they laid out was.
Well, it was the most Apple thing ever. I think the words artificial intelligence were only used once in the keynote to say it's artificial intelligence for the rest of us. Apple, in typical fashion, has just swapped out the artificial for Apple, and it's pushed towards putting generative AI into its products, which, as you said, is pretty late. I think it is early in this race for artificial intelligence. Apple has a lot of brain power. It has a lot of money to spend. It had to take on a partner in order to keep up with the cutting edge large language models that people use. Of course, is OpenAI. There was some controversy about that. And I think overall, it's what we expect to see from Apple. Not the first the first company to jump into a field, right, but the company that says, we're going to take this confusing situation and make it simple for people to use.
Well, that's my question, which is, I know you haven't had an opportunity to test it yet. There seem to be two elements that may take some time to really actually work itself out. One is how much of the sort of cross-app AI product innovation is actually going to be there in iOS 18 off the bat. Some of that even seemed to be suggesting that they might not actually roll that out immediately, that some of that might come later on. How sophisticated that stuff's going to be, meaning when you are talking to Siri, asking it to do things that might involve both your calendar and your notes and a couple other things all at one time. And then this idea that OpenAI and using ChatGPT for certain types of writing products and other things, that each time you do it, you're going to effectively have to select and decide that you're actively leaving the ecosystem, how that's going to work, and whether you think they're going to ultimately integrate ChatGPT, Gemini. We were talking earlier, would Elon Musk one day get Grok in there? Could Claude, which is owned by Anthropic, get in there? And how this whole sort of system is going to work, and how seamless or not that experience will ultimately turn out to be.
Okay, yeah, two things there. First of all, the using multiple apps, having your chatbot basically, go through all your apps and do things for you. And this is something, ironically, that the original Siri team at Apple, over 10 years ago, wanted to put into to Siri, and then they wound up going off on their own and tried to implement it in something that wound up at Samsung. It is a difficult thing that people think is inevitable, but there's a lot of things they have to get right to do it, especially when you want your AI to do things for you and say, wow, you've made an appointment in Seattle, I'm going to book a flight for you. You can imagine what can go wrong when the AI has the power to do that, or even if you wanted to tell it to do it, and one app in the chain of things you want to do isn't going to work. So as you say, we're going to have to see how that rolls out and how well that works. As for the second part, I think that you're not going to wind up having to do it every single time. There probably will be a setting where you could just say, anytime I want to use ChatGPT, let it happen. And they actually did say that if you pay for ChatGPT, you could move your subscription over to Apple. So maybe some people will buy, the subscription to ChatGPT to use it within Apple. This could be good for ChatGPT that way.
We were actually trying to talk about the economics of this in the last hour. Nobody's really sorted that out or been public about it. Historically, Google has actually paid Apple money for that very valuable search box on its Safari browser. Do you believe that OpenAI is paying Apple? Do you believe that Apple is paying OpenAI? Every time that those servers are getting hit, that's going to be a lot of processing power. And who's paying for that?
That's a great question. My sense is that OpenAI is probably not giving a bundle of money to Apple, but as you indicate, they're probably willing to absorb some processing costs in order to have this partnership work. And Apple they said openly after the keynote that they're looking at other things. That Gemini, the Google's product could be worked in there, and there could be a multitude of LLMs, large language model, generative AI products that could swap in to Apple, and Apple has their own. You have to realize that, the things that they've said, like autocomplete and emails and their photo AI, that's working on their models. So maybe one day Apple might build its own.
Do you believe that, I don't know if you saw what Elon Musk said yesterday. He seemed to be very frustrated with the idea that OpenAI would be embedded at a very deep level into this iOS. I'm not sure it genuinely is in this case just yet. But one of the things that Apple made a point of about privacy is that even if you're using something like an OpenAI through the Apple service, they're not going to be able to train on any of the information that you'd be effectively inputting. Do you buy that?
Yeah, I think so. I think all the companies are saying now that you're, like Microsoft and the others, that your personal information, the stuff you store on your corporate cloud, your own emails, they're not going to use that to train their AI. And I do believe that. Apple says they've built in extra protections. They say even if Microsoft, for instance, goes back on its word and wants to integrate that, they probably could do it without you knowing. Apple's saying we're building in protections that even if we wanted to break our word to you, we wouldn't be able to do it because we're using encryption and other privacy techniques to stop us from violating our word.